Welcome, listeners, to the Let's Talk and Walk podcast. Today we are walking by the beach, discussing and reviewing a novel about the fundamental strangeness of being human. It's Albert Camus' The Stranger.
Yeah, a huge book from the 20th century.
Yeah.
And we've gathered quite a bit of material on it, articles, research, different takes. Think of it as our collective notes for this deep dive.
Exactly. And our goal today is really to unpack it, to try and understand the central character, Meursault, and get into the philosophy behind it all. It's challenging stuff, but so insightful.
Definitely insightful. It's often called a rite of passage for readers, isn't it? Translated into, 60 languages, sold millions. Its impact is just huge.
It really is. So, okay, how do we approach this? It seems simple on the surface, but there are so many layers. Philosophy, the character, the context. Where do we start? Maybe with Meursault himself. Who is this guy?
Well, the first thing that hits you is his indifference. Like a profound indifference to what society expects, emotionally speaking. He just doesn't seem to react the way people think he should, the classic outsider.
Right. And that indifference immediately puts you face to face with the novel's core idea, doesn't it? This human need we have for things to make sense, for meaning. And then there's the universe, just silent, indifferent. And that clash, that gap, that's the absurd, according to Camus.
Precisely. And Meursault's journey, it's not static. He starts out sort of instinctively detached, almost unaware in part one. But by the end, he's consciously embracing that absurdity. It's a transformation.
Which brings us to the big question, I guess. Why does this book, with this seemingly cold character, still grab us? Why does it feel so relevant today? What's it showing us?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And looking at Camus' own life, it actually offers some clues, some interesting parallels.
His background in Algeria,
Right.
Grew up poor, very sensory kind of life, apparently, close to the elements.
Yeah, and think about his mother. Illiterate, partially deaf. That relationship, it seems complex. It wasn't maybe straightforward. And that might give us a more nuanced way to see Meursault's relationship with his mother.
Because everyone jumps on his reaction or lack of reaction at her funeral. Society condemns him for it.
They really do. But near the end, Meursault feels this deep connection to her. He believes she also faced this meaninglessness and sort of accepted it. It complicates that easy reading of just pure indifference. Maybe it mirrors something in Camus' own life.
Interesting. And wasn't there something about illness? Tuberculosis?
Yes. He got TB when he was only 17. A huge shock, obviously. Forced him to confront death, fragility, really early on.
You can see how that physical confrontation with mortality could feed into absurdist ideas. That intense awareness of the body, of life's precariousness, it resonates with Meursault's focus on the physical, his eventual clash with his own death sentence.
Absolutely. And even later, moving to Paris, despite being French-Algerian, he felt like an outsider there.
So that feeling of being the étranger, the foreigner or stranger, it wasn't just abstract for Camus, it had personal roots.
Definitely seems like it. Now, how about the way the book is written? That style is so distinctive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The style blank. 0-degree writing. It's first person. But so. Plain. Detached. Factual. Short sentences.
And that's not just stylistic flair, is it? It's doing something crucial. It perfectly reflects Meursault's mindset, his focus on sensations over interpretation. You're inside his head, seeing the world stripped bare of emotional commentary. It makes you feel alienated alongside him.
The style is the philosophy, in a way. That clinical feel mirrors the gentle indifference of the universe Camus talks about. You read about the murder, the funeral, without the usual cues telling you how to feel. It forces you to confront the raw event.
Exactly. The language itself becomes part of that absurd experience.
And the structure, too. The two distinct parts. Part one, his life before the murder. Just routine, sensory, passive, existing.
Right. Existence over essence, you could say. He's just there, living in the moment. Then, boom, part two. The arrest, the trial.
And that's where society tries to step in and define him, right? To impose an essence, make sense of him through their rules.
Totally. The trial is fascinating because it's less about the actual killing.
Especially since those extra shots he fires kind of rule out simple self-defense.
Right. So it becomes about his character. Did he grieve properly? Why was he swimming the next day? His lack of remorse becomes the main evidence. It's a trial of his soul, not just his actions.
So the whole structure becomes this argument about how society tries to label and contain anyone who doesn't fit the mold, who doesn't play the game.
It really does. Okay, zooming back in on Meursault himself. What are his defining traits, really?
Well, indifference is obviously number one. Maman died today. Or yesterday, maybe? I don't know. Or when Marie asks if he loves her, if he wants to marry her.
He says it didn't mean anything, or it didn't make any difference. It sounds harsh, but maybe it's not meant cruelly. Just
Yes.
unfiltered honesty.
Yeah, which links to that radical honesty. He refuses to lie, even when it would help him, like telling his lawyer, no, I wasn't sad at the funeral, I was mostly just hot and tired, because that was his physical truth.
And that refusal to perform, to say the expected thing, that's what truly alienates him. More than the indifference itself, almost.
Absolutely. And then there's his connection to the physical world. Heat, sun, sea, touch.
Overwhelmingly so.
He even says the sun is why he killed the Arab, which sounds, well, absurd. But it points to something non-rational physical driving him.
It suggests that in a world without inherent meaning, maybe the physical, the tangible, is the only reality he trusts. His actions follow that logic, not society's abstract codes.
Which just cements his outsider status, no ambition, no social niceties. The prosecutor calls him a soulless monster.
Yeah, lacking moral principles. But his otherness is vital. He's like this uncomfortable mirror reflecting back society's own assumptions, its own need for predictable narratives. He disrupts their illusions.
And that leads us right into the core philosophy. Absurdism. Camus lays it out in The Myth of Sisyphus, which came out around the same time.
Right. And the key thing about the absurd for Camus isn't just that the world is meaningless or that we crave meaning, it's the collision, the gap between our human desire for order and reason and the universe's blank, silent indifference. That's the absurd condition, that dissonance.
It's crucial to remember it's not nihilism, though. It doesn't have to lead to despair. Recognizing the absurd can actually be freeing.
Exactly. Camus talks about three consequences or responses: revolt, freedom, and passion. Revolt means rejecting illusions, refusing false hope, constantly pushing back against imposed meanings.
Freedom comes from realizing there's no grand plan, no ultimate judge. You're free from conventional morality. It's a total absence of hope in some future reward, which means you're free to live now.
Paradoxical, isn't it?
Yeah.
And passion follows from that living intensely in the present, valuing the quantity, the richness of experience itself, because there's no external scoreboard. That conscious dissatisfaction fuels engagement.
And you see Meursault moving towards this. Part one is like instinctual absurdism. He just lives it.
But the trial, the prison cell, that's the pressure cooker. Society tries to force its meaning onto him.
Until that final explosion with the chaplain, that's his moment of conscious realization, right? Rejecting God, the afterlife, saying, nothing mattered.
Yes, and he says it emptied him of all hope, but in a good way, a liberating way. He finally aligns himself with the universe's benign indifference and finds peace.
Wow. Okay, so from that core, you can see all these themes branching out. Alienation, obviously. His detachment reflects that basic human separateness.
And the critique of justice. The trial is just an absurd spectacle, really. Judging conformity, not the crime. That line, any man who does not weep at his mother's funeral runs the risk of being sentenced to death. It's chilling. It shows the legal system is just another social construct.
Then indifference itself, moving from his personal trait to this cosmic principle he embraces, finding peace in the universe, not caring.
And the whole search for meaning Meursault rejects it, while others, like the magistrate with his crucifix or the chaplain, desperately need it. It suggests meaning is something we create or learn to live without.
And death is everywhere. From page 1 to the final sentence, the sun even seems linked to it.
Definitely. Facing his own death is what brings Meursault clarity. It strips everything else away. Death is the ultimate meaninglessness, but confronting it honestly is what frees him.
The other characters really highlight all this too, acting as foils.
Like Marie, she wants love, marriage, the conventional things. His honest, indifferent responses confuse and sadden her, showing how far he is from the norm.
And Raymond, he's all about reputation, violence, but he performs better socially than Meursault. Society kind of accepts his facade more readily than Meursault's raw honesty. Plus, he sets the whole plot in motion.
His conflict, his gun. Then there's Salamano and his dog. That strange, abusive relationship, his grief. It contrasts Meursault's detachment, but also shows another weird facet of connection and facing mortality.
And the chaplain, representing institutional religion, is the final trigger for Meursault's big affirmation of his own worldview.
Exactly. Now, circling back to style for a sec, that style blanc, it's not just about indifference. It actually makes the reader feel it.
Yeah.
You have to actively engage because the usual emotional roadmap isn't there.
Right. And the symbols are so potent. The sun, the heat everywhere, oppressive, physical, tied to indifference, maybe even death. Killing because of the sun feels like pointing to something beyond rational explanation.
The courtroom as society trying to impose order on the absurd. The sea as freedom, physical pleasure, nature.
And the crucifix, the symbol of the meaning system, Meursault completely rejects. The magistrate waving it around shows how threatened the system feels by him.
And we absolutely have to talk about the colonial context. Setting it in French Algeria is not accidental.
Yeah, the fact that the victim is just the Arab. No name, no story. It's dehumanizing.
It mirrors the colonial reality, the erasure of the local population. And the trial focusing on Meursault's feelings, rather than the life taken that reflects the skewed values, the inherent injustice of that colonial system, its indifference on a societal scale.
The French title, L'étranger, meaning foreigner, too, captures that layer perhaps better than the stranger.
It does. And more recent works like Camus Daud's The Meursault Investigation directly challenge this by giving the victim a name, Moussa, and a history. It forces us to see the novel within that specific brutal reality. You miss a huge dimension if you ignore the colonial critique.
So putting it all together, Meursault really seems to be Camus' absurd hero, like Sisyphus.
He lives out those principles. Revolt against norms, freedom and accepting fate, passion for the present, for sensation.
Like Sisyphus pushing his rock, knowing it's pointless but doing it consciously. Meursault confronts the meaninglessness, the routine, the sentence of death.
Right. And just as Camus says we must imagine Sisyphus happy, Meursault finds his own kind of happiness, his peace, in that final acceptance of the world's indifference.
The difference maybe being that Sisyphus is already conscious, while Meursault becomes conscious through his ordeal. He goes from instinct to this passionate awareness, that final wish for cries of hate. It's like a final act of defiance, of connection on his own terms.
Yeah, it's powerful. The book wasn't instantly acclaimed, apparently, but after World War II, it just took off. Spoke to a generation dealing with chaos and existential dread.
And it stuck around, a classic, taught everywhere, still feels relevant. Maybe, like you said, because the world feels increasingly absurd.
Could be. Think about social media, the pressure to perform happiness or outrage. Meursault's radical refusal to play along feels very potent. Alienation, the search for meaning, these haven't gone away.
Its power is maybe less in giving answers and more in forcing us to ask the questions. It shows one way someone might live with meaninglessness, and that pushes us to think about our own lives, our own choices.
And it doesn't end in despair. That final scene after the outburst, he feels emptied of hope, yes, but also peace, liberation.
Right, it's not typical happiness. It's tranquility found in accepting death, accepting the indifferent universe, letting go of the struggle for meaning that wasn't there to begin with. His freedom is internal.
So the challenge it leaves us with isn't necessarily being Meursault, but to think about how we face that indifference. How do we find authenticity? What does meaning look like for us?
Especially when society still often judges people who don't, play the game, just like Meursault's courtroom did. It's a really disquieting thought to end on.
It really is. A question that stays with you long after the final page.
All right, that wraps up our walk for today. Definitely gave us a lot to think about. Maybe something to mull over with a coffee or a snack.
It was a really interesting one, and we truly hope you all listening enjoyed it as much as we did. Thanks for joining us.
We greatly value your engagement. If you found this episode informative, please consider leaving a like. We also welcome your suggestions for new topics and areas you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Feel free to share those in the comments section.
And finally, to ensure you don't miss out on our upcoming content, please hit the subscribe button and share it with your friends.
We look forward to bringing you more interesting discussions. Thank you for listening to the Let's Talk and Walk podcast.